Hi, today I'm going to show you how to make some different kinds of clasps. It's time to start thinking about clasps as part of the art and part of the beauty of what you're doing. The clasp can actually be part of the design. Like this bracelet, for example, this has sort of a horse and tackle kind of feel, and it's using the leather in a way that is, I think, kind of rugged and nice. I don't know how well this would stay on your hand with any kind of slack, but here's another example of where the clasp has become part of the piece. This kind of clasp is called a toggle clasp because it has a toggle on it. And notice when you put the leather all the way to one side, the toggle has to be a little bit longer than the diameter of your circle to make sure it doesn't fall through. Same thing on both sides. To unleash it, you just tilt it so it's parallel to the leather and push it through. Okay, this toggle style clasp stays on very well. Another kind of clasp that people like to make is this one where it's kind of like a hook, a lobster hook. Goes in your circle, comes back out. This one tends to fall off for me a lot, so I don't use it a lot. But if you do make it, notice that the way that this is bent down, that's what helps keep the toggle, the clasp on, the hook on. So make sure that you have a little bit of a bend in there. The toggle can be made with a single copper or brass heavy gauge washer. You want this kind of metal and this wire to be a pretty heavy gauge, so like a 12 gauge or a 14 gauge, so that it can be nice and strong to put up with any wear and tear. Now I use this as an example because it's kind of artless. It's huge, so this is really going to stick out like two antennae on the back of your neck and catch in your hair and be a pain in your clothing. It doesn't look that pretty. At least they textured it, but there's no patina. I don't even know if it's matching the character or the rest of the necklace. A pretty artless job on this. Your clasp is part of your craftsmanship and you want it to look beautiful, just like the rest of your piece. So this one is a little better done. Okay, it has a curl on the end, which is a little prettier. It's been patinaed, it's been hammered. It's a little bit of a smaller size, so it seems more fitting to be in the back of your neck. It's still secure, it's not going to go anywhere. This is a really kind of a nicer example of that same kind of clasp. On Pinterest, you're going to see a bunch of clasps that are from copper wire. They can simply hook like this, and I'm going to make a bracelet out of this, which I'll show you in a little bit. But first I'm going to show you how to put together the toggle clasp with the washer. So the first thing you need is some heavy gauge wire. This is 14 gauge. I don't want to make it too big, so I'm going to use 14 gauge instead of 12 gauge. Sometimes 14 gauge and 12 gauge are a little bit ornery to get to bend, so I'm going to have a pair of man pliers here to use in case I can't get them with the more delicate bent nose or something. The first thing I want to do is get a fresh end on there, a nice flat end with my flush cut pliers. I'm going to use the smallest barrel on my 20 millimeter. You could use the middle one if you're not feeling very secure, but I'd like this to be sort of small and subtle, so make a giant jump ring with it. Release, twist around until you have a nice perfect circle. And now I'm going to trim off my jump ring exactly the same place my other one end. I got the flush cut part headed toward the piece I'm going to keep. I'm going to hold back in my pliers a little bit so I don't rip off the tips of my pliers by cutting a heavy gauge wire. Okay, so now I have a pretty decent jump ring here. I'm going to bend it past itself, put it back together, make sure it looks really good. Okay, not nearly done. Now I need to add some texture. It always makes it lose its shape a little bit, so you might have to use your bent nose pliers to get it back the way that you want it. This is going to have leather on it, so it doesn't have to be as perfect a fit as if it was having another metal jump ring to fall off, but I do want it to look nice, so I'm going to make it just perfect. And I might have to retrim that end, but there's my jump ring part. The next part is the toggle, and for this I'm going to need a length of the copper. Again, I want to get myself a nice flat edge to work with. Okay, and another edge over here, probably going to be just fine, about that long. I always guess like 3 times the length of the diameter of your jump ring, 2 and 3. So I could even cut a little shorter. Okay. Now when you're making your toggle, you take your jump ring pliers or your round nose pliers and you grab it right in the middle, like you're going to shake hands with it, holding the pliers like you're shaking hands. Dead center. If you put it up here, you're barely going to have room for just one length of leather, and that's fine. If you're going to put it up here, you're going to have a bigger hole that's a little more comfortable to work with. Sometimes I'm using 2 strands of leather, like if I was making this, for example. So I might want a larger hole for that purpose as well. I'm going to put this right in the middle. I'm going to fold one end over, and then I'm going to fold the other end over. Okay, and this is how it's going to lay on the washer. So keep that in mind. If it's not quite centered, you can always fool around with the center part of it. I might even squish this a little bit with this to make sure I have a nice, good, solid center on it. Bend them so they're nice and straight. Okay, how am I doing? Always check my distance. I have plenty of distance on there to make my curl with. That's good. If it's too much distance, I'd have to trim it, but I think it'll be okay. Take my round nose pliers and curl sideways. Okay. Notice this is not facing up like a steer horn. This is facing down so that when it lays on my toggle, or my circle, sorry, it'll be flat. I don't want this pointing up like this. It'll have to be down. And going the other direction. This one I am going to trim. It's a little bit long. Just like that, I think, to get my curl in there. I'm going to go the opposite direction with my curl as I went with the other one. And I'm going to finish off my curls with a nice good squeeze. I want them nice and tight. Okay, there's my toggle. Double check it to make sure it's okay. Yep. Okay, and now I'm going to give these some texture. Put it on the edge of the block. Hold on to the part out here. I can even hammer this part if I want to go the other way. Okay. And I'm going to give it a little bit of a bend so it looks like it has a little bit more of an arc on it. Okay, so you can see it has a little bit of a bend, and that's going to set very nicely in my toggle. Okay. Now, I'm going to have to wrap a piece of copper wire around here, around my leather to hold it onto the clasp. And so I'm going to want a very high gauge, this is 20 gauge, to make it easy to wrap around the leather. Find the end. There's the end. Okay. I'm going to patina this right now. That way it's ready to go when I wrap it around my leather. You do not want to put your leather in the patina. So I have to have everything ready to go before I wrap it around. So I'm going to go take my toggle and my wire that I'm about to use and go put it in the. Okay, so I've got everything out of my patina and now I'm ready to put it on my necklace. Now if there is something I want to put on this that doesn't go on a jump ring, I need to do it now because I'm about to seal up these ends and I won't be able to slip this through a pendant or anything like that. Now luckily everything I'm doing is on a jump ring, so it won't matter. I'm going to get my toggle ready, put the leather through the hole, fold it down. Okay, so it's all ready to go. Now make this long enough that you can hang on to it really well with your hand. Then get your wire that's been patinaed and you're going to hold onto all 3 things. So I've got the wire and both pieces of leather in this hand. And with this hand, I'm going to start wrapping around. Again, in that tight, slinky way. I don't want any spaces in between my coils. Now the first one might not be very good. That's okay. Keep on wrapping, and they should get tighter and tighter as you go, because you're going to be able to go back and fix the first one. There I go. Once I've got 2 or 3 nice tight ones on there, I can quit. And now I can hang on to this side. I've got this big long piece to hang on to, and I can fix this one to make it nicer. So go back to where it started to get loose. Make sure it's nice and tight. And now I'm going to wrap this one around. Nice and tight. You only need a couple wraps. This doesn't need to be an inch long. It just needs to be a few on there. Okay. Trim my end. Now if it's not tight enough, take your pliers, scrunch them up, make sure they're nice. Okay. I'm going to trim off my ends. Trim off that end. And now the important part. If you don't do this, your leather will just slip out of your coil. You're going to take the top coil only, not all of them, just the very top one with the top one on the back, and squish it into the leather. So it grips it. I've already squished so hard I cut my leather in half, and that's very disappointing at this stage in the game, so don't squish too hard, but you want it to be nice and grippy. Now I'm going to do the same thing to the bottom coil, the bottom only, and squeeze it in. A nice good grip. Okay, I don't know if you can see what that looks like. Test it. It's good. It's not going anywhere. Trim off your end. And you're ready for the other side. Same thing. Put it on. Make it go through. Pick up your wire. Hold all 3 pieces in one hand. The wire and both pieces of leather. With this hand, it's going to wrap around nice and tight. This finger is really holding that while this one was pushing down, and now my thumb is going to push it back away from me. Finger down, thumb back up, finger down, thumb back up, and now it's going well. Now I got a nice tight wrap on there. That's good. Okay, I've got enough left. I can hold on to it. Now I'm going to go back to this guy, bend him up, make sure he's nice and tight in there, and I can keep on coming toward me, making that nice and tight. Okay, so it looks like that. If it's not tight, just give it a little squeeze, tighten everything up. Trim off my ends. Take your bent nose pliers, squeeze just the top one. Same thing on the bottom. He just bent up in a way I didn't like. Get him straightened back out and crush him back down. Okay, test it. Good. Trim off your leather. And now you have a nice toggle clasp to use. Goes through, open it up. Perfect, that's not going anywhere. Very nice, okay. I'm also making a bracelet with a very decorative clasp, where the clasp will be part of the thing that you want to look at. Gonna sand all these later. Put my first one through. Use my patinaed wire. Hold everything in one hand and wrap. Okay. Hold on to this, go back and fix this guy. Okay, trim off my ends. I have a little one that's sticking up there. I'm not going to wrestle with him in the bent nose. I'm just going to trim him off. Sometimes it's cheaper than your time. Squeeze that down. Top one squeeze. And I really only have like 4 wraps on there, but that's going to be plenty. Squeeze my bottom one. They're good ones. Test it out. It's good, and I don't have any to trim off because I purposely did it very short. And my last one patina on there. Goes through that hole. Make sure I measure before I get all crazy. I might want to come through a little bit more. Okay. Use my patinaed wire, hang on to all three over here, start wrapping, crank it nice and tight around. 2, 3. Tighten that up, make sure that's nice. Now I can keep on going with the other side. I should have waited to trim that because I don't have anything to hang on to, but luckily it's going okay. Trim off my extra. Bent nose, I'm going to crush my top one. Crush my bottom one. Now, I will expect that you're only using leather when you are making these beautiful crafted pieces with clasps. If there's something that you want to make just to take home and put on a chain later, please just use a piece of yarn. The leather is not for anything that's not going to be used for a beautiful piece later. If you're just going to replace your piece later with and put on a chain, then please don't use the leather. Just get a piece of yarn and put it on your greeting card. It won't count against you. I just want you to use the leather if you're going to make a nice, crafted, beautiful clasp that has some artwork to it. So I'll shine these up, take some pictures, and show you in a little bit. Here's the finished product. A nice little copper bracelet where the clasp is the point of interest. It is tight enough so that it doesn't easily come out of the clasp, which is nice. Like, I think it would have to be pretty, if it were a lot looser, it could come out while I was wearing it, but that's what that ended up turning out to look like.